And so they've gone back to the same thing that got them into the crisis in the first place. The same neoliberal policies that gave rise to this crisis and led to the meltdown in 2008, they're still doing. Do you know that today in Canada, household debt, that's the debt that you and I have, our mortgage, our car, our credit cards, etc., 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 for education, for our kids, you know, student loans. The level of household debt today is higher, significantly higher than it was even in 2008. So if it was the debt problem, or the debt bubble that got us into this jam in the first place, what is their answer? And the irony of it all is that on the one hand they're saying governments must be more austere, they have to be more fiscally responsible, they can't run deficits and so on, and yet at the same time they're urging everybody else to spend, spend, spend. And when we don't spend, like this Christmas period for instance, they say, you're hurting our Canadian economy, you should go out and buy more presents. Or buy it shows you, in fact, the irrationality and the desperation of the capitalist class. I don't want to say too much more about the current crisis. I think most people are familiar with it. I have some interesting statistics, and nobody really likes statistics, so I'm not going to bore you with them. But I want to put this in the context of Canada and the global crisis. Because the interesting thing is that the Canadian economy is a bit of, I won't say an anomaly, but it's an exception in terms of the advanced capitalist countries, because the depth of the crisis in Canada is not as bad as it is in the United States, or it is in most European countries. Why is that? Well, we could have a good discussion about that. I think part of it has to do with the fact that Canada, and this is not a positive thing, by the way, don't misread me here, but it's a fact, that the Canadian economy, and by the way, the Harper government is really pushing this even more intensely. The Canadian economy is very reliant on commodities, oil, gold, potash, minerals, and so on. So what's the price of gold today as a result of this crisis? $1,800 an ounce? What about oil prices? Very high. So this has helped to some extent soften the impact of the crisis in Canada compared to other countries. But how long that will last, of course, remains to be seen. Because Canada is also heavily dependent on the U.S. market. And the U.S. economy is still very depressed. In any case, we have a government in Ottawa, the Harper government, which for political and ideological reasons is intent on doing the same thing that they're doing in Europe, even though the situation in Canada isn't nearly as bad. They want to impose austerity, not because they think it's good for the economy, but because they think it's good for their friends, right? They want to dismantle. Okay, take care. Thanks for coming. So, for instance, if you look at the ratio of debt, government debt, to the gross domestic product, this is some of the things that you will see in the financial pages. Gross domestic product is the sum total of everything that's produced in the domestic economy, and then the ratio of debt, government debt, to the gross domestic product. You see in countries like Greece, it's 116%. That means that the government debt is 116% of what they make every year. In Portugal, it's 94%. In Italy, it's 118%. In the United States, it's 102%. In Canada, it's only 84%. So in fact, government debt in Canada is lower, relatively speaking, than in a lot of other countries. If you look at total debt total debt includes both government debt, business debt, and even our personal household debt. If you were to add all of that together and compare that to the GDP, here are again interesting figures. In Japan, the total debt compared to the national economy, the GDP, is 471%. Very high. In Great Britain, it's 466%. In the United States, it's 300%. And in Canada, it's only about 250%. So again, it's lower. Not massively lower, right? If you look at external debt, very similar situation. Public and private together, but external, owed to foreign investors or foreign bankers, yeah? In the United States, per capita, it's almost $50,000 for every American. The U.S. economy owes foreign investors $50,000 for every single per capita. Yeah? In the United Kingdom, it's even higher, almost $150,000 per person. In Canada, it's only $29,000. So here again, Canada has lower external debt than most of these other countries. And here's an interesting thing, household debts. This is, you know, for the working class, the people, right? The relationship between household debt and the GDP in the United States and Great Britain is both around 100%. In Canada, it's 88%. In the BRIC countries, you know what I mean by BRIC? Brazil, Russia, India, China, right? The emerging economies, the level of household debt compared to their national economies is only 10%. So you have much lower household debt in countries like India or China. In China, it's really low, it's like 3%. But in the advanced capitalist countries, it's very high. And if you look at the growth rate of the economies themselves, China, still about 10%. They say next year it might go down a little bit to 9% or 8.5%, but it's still very high. Russia's 4%, and the European Union, about 1%. The same with the United States. Canada's about 2.5%. But you see, in the advanced capitalist countries, this is the heartland of capitalism, right? Europe, United States, Canada, Japan, the growth rates are very low and getting lower. Bon. Now, this is the part where we get into. Well, let me just say a few things about, because one of the questions that's raised. Who's under attack? This is pretty quick, pretty easy. Who's under attack? Just about everybody, except for the ruling class. Yeah. But it's not just the workers and the peasants, and even small shop owners, you know, middle strata. The other thing that's under attack is the state itself, in a certain sense. People talk about the state disappearing. The state is not disappearing. The state, if anything, is getting stronger. The military is getting stronger. The prisons, the intelligence agencies, you know, these repressive aspects of the state are getting stronger. But what's getting weaker and what's being dismantled is what's sometimes called the redistributive role of the state. It's a misnomer. It's a bad term, because in fact, it's not that the government is giving back to, redistributing from the rich to the poor. The rich stole from the poor. But then we get a little bit back in social services and healthcare and so on and so forth. But that aspect of the state is being systematically attacked everywhere. You know, pensions for retired workers, labor standards, minimum wages. You know, for instance, one of the things that the Greek government had to agree to as one of the bailout packages was actually to drop the minimum wage. Not just to freeze the minimum wage, to lower the minimum wage for the poorest workers. So you see this happening systematically around the world. The other thing that's under attack is the environment. It's important not to forget this. It's a very crucial aspect of the struggle. And even though a lot of environmentalists, don't have a good, clear revolutionary perspective or Marxist perspective, and we have to help them to develop such a perspective. But the environmental question is a very important question. And the failure of the recent summit in South Africa, in Durban, is going to have very dire consequences, first and foremost, for the poorest countries in this world, who are going to be the heaviest impacted by climate change. So.